Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about how the central government, through a bill, could have even more control of the national capital. We also talk about how startups like Urban Company and Zomato are taking advantage of the consumer data that they have gathered over the years. But first, we talk about External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. Since the pandemic started, India's diplomatic visits to other countries have been limited. But with cases around the world going down and restrictions easing, those visits have now started again. Like right now, Jaishankar is on a 5-day trip to Maldives and Sri Lanka, two of India's key maritime neighbors in the Indian Ocean. This trip is significant because over the years, China has been expanding its influence and footprint in both these countries, which obviously India doesn't want. In this segment, Indian Express's associate editor Shubhajit Roy joins us to talk about this visit and its highlights so far. So Shubhajit, we know that External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar right now is on this 5-day visit to Maldives and Sri Lanka. Could you talk about why this region that these two countries are in is significant for India?
Yeah, if you really see the location of these two countries on the map, you realize that these two countries are on the Indian Ocean region in the strategically placed on the shipping lanes which cross through the Indian Ocean. So they are quite strategically placed, and several countries, including China, they try to woo these two countries, and essentially they are in India's strategic backyard. So the Indian government feels that one has to have a strong, broad, and deep relationship with both the countries, not just with the governments of the day, but also with the people of these two countries. And for that, one needs to proactively do projects in these two countries, whether you build airports or build roads or give scholarships or several other stuff. So that's why it is strategically significant, because there is a jostling for influence in these two countries, and China is India's number one competitor in these two countries.
And the reason you build these projects, make ports, schools, and hospitals maybe, is it because in a very clear way you're helping out the country and the country knows that you are invested in its development?
Absolutely. Shashank, not only that you're helping their country and you invested, but also you care about their future, their present, and about the people. So you create a sort of a goodwill, and that is what diplomatic means are for, that you create goodwill in your neighborhood, in your backyard, where you need to have an influence so that, strategically, you have a stronger footprint than any of your potential competitors.
And we are recording this on the 27th morning. Jaishankar is already in the Maldives right now. And his visit comes at a time when there have been protests going on against the current Maldives government. And these protests are actually about India. They are broadly being referred to as anti-India protests. The protesters have been saying that the current government has been sold out to India. And we understand that this is because the current government has been proclaiming that they have an India first policy. And because of this, the opposition thinks that India would have an influence on Maldives' defense policy as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, it's a question of, when a big neighbor and a smaller neighbor, they have a relationship. So there are always political churning in the smaller country, in the smaller neighbor. And there will be groups which will question the loyalty of the incumbent of the ruling party, where they will be questioned on the fact that they're selling out to India, they're outsourcing the defense policy, all of that. So it's a very natural debate that usually happens in smaller countries when next to the larger neighbors, be it in Bangladesh or Nepal or Maldives or Sri Lanka. And that is the perennial theme that we are seeing playing out right now in Maldives as well.
Right, and for Jaishankar, what have been the highlights of this visit so far?
Yeah, so the visit is still on, and so Jaishankar arrived Saturday evening, and late on Saturday night, he held his talks with his counterpart Abdullah Shahid, who is the foreign minister of Maldives, and they signed a couple of pacts. One is on health. The other one is on education. On health is essentially about the COVID vaccination certificates recognition so that Indians could travel easily to Maldives. Similarly, Maldives can easily travel to India. Then there is a education pact which was signed for interlinking library and knowledge networks between the two countries. Then there are a host of projects that are being announced or inaugurated. For example, there is this project of the police academy, which is called the National College of Policing and Law Enforcement, which is being inaugurated on Sunday and is India's largest grant funded project in Maldives. So essentially, India is building that police academy for Maldives officers so that Maldives police service can train its officers and enhance its crime fighting capacities.
Besides this, there are also projects that will help improve Maldives' transportation system, maritime security, and sports infrastructure.
So, if you really see the length and breadth of the projects, they cut across different sectors from tourism to connectivity to water sanitation facilities on 34 islands to climate adaptation measures. So, it's very broad based approach that India is trying to take as it tries to help the Maldives government with projects.
And Shubhajit, what about Sri Lanka? In what setting and political context will Jaishankar arrive there?
Yeah, so in Sri Lanka, the issue is that Sri Lanka is right now going through a very severe economic crisis. The situation there has been dire. India has just announced a $1 billion economic package. And in that context, Sri Lanka, because of COVID, what happened was very tourist economy led economy. And the country, because it was shut down or there was not much tourism happening. Therefore, it really faced challenges, and right now it's in a dire strait. There are protests there as well for power cuts. There is economic crisis there happening. So India reaching out to Sri Lanka as well with help, with economic assistance, so that it doesn't go with us looking for assistance from other countries. In this case, China. So that is the broader context in which this particular visit by S. Jaishankar is happening between India and Sri Lanka.
And Sri Lanka will also be hosting the BIMSTEC Summit, which is an initiative for technical and economic cooperation among 7 South Asian and Southeast Asian countries. And in this summit, PM Modi will be participating. Could you talk a bit about this summit?
Yeah, Shashank. So you're right. In the next 2-3 days, in fact, Sri Lanka will be hosting the fifth BIMSTEC summit via video conferencing, and this will be held on 30th of March. So one of the agenda of Jaishankar's visit is also to prepare for that particular BIMSTEC summit. So he's gone there to attend the foreign ministers meeting, which will be held a day before, that is on March 29th on Tuesday. So what this BIMSTEC actually is a acronym for a long name for this grouping called the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. So this long winding acronym, actually this grouping includes Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Nepal and Bhutan. And of course, India and Sri Lanka are there as well. So Sri Lanka is the host. It's the current BIMSTEC chair. So Prime Minister Modi will be attending it via video conferencing. Now, we understand that this summit was supposed to be held earlier, but was postponed due to the pandemic. And it was supposed to be held in person earlier. But then what happened was, because in Myanmar we have a military junta government, which has been criticized by India as well in the last few months. So India actually leaned on, gently nudged Sri Lanka to host a virtual summit so that India didn't want to be seen sharing the stage with the Myanmar's rulers whose democratic credentials are not exactly very impeccable. So, in that context, this summit is being held. And we'll see probably some movement on what happens in terms of technical and economic cooperation and how to deal with the COVID-related, post-pandemic related challenges, including economic recovery and all of that in that summit. So that's what will happen next week.
And next we talk about Delhi. Last week, the central government introduced a bill in the Lok Sabha that would give the centre more control over the local governing bodies of Delhi. Many in the opposition have raised concerns about this bill and have called it unconstitutional. And several people, including Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal of the Aam Aadmi Party, have said that this bill is just a ploy to delay the local civic body polls. In this segment, Indian Express's Mallica Joshi, who reports on Delhi politics, joins us to talk about what this bill proposes to do. Mallica, we know that because Delhi is a union territory and the national capital, the central government controls many of its affairs. Like the police, for example, comes under the centre and not the Aam Aadmi Party, which is currently in power. But now this new bill gives even more control to the centre. Could you explain how it proposes to do that?
So, as you said, in Delhi, a lot of things like police, land, law and order, and also services, which determines how officers are transferred and when they're posted, it all comes under the center at present. The MCD, which right now is trifurcated and is in three parts in the north, east and south Delhi. Even now, a lot of it does come under the control of the center through the MHA. But there's, certain sections where the Delhi government was controlling a few things. So I'll give you an example of some of the things that the center was actually controlling. These would be, let's say, the power of delimitation. So if constituencies and wards had to be redrawn, the Delhi government's assent was important for that. Then there was salary allowances and leaves of the commissioners that are appointed to the corporations, and sanctioning of suits against officers for misappropriation or misapplication of funds and things like these. So the powers were never very much, but the Delhi government still had certain control when it came to MCDs. With this new bill, all of these powers are now gone. And, one of the officers I was talking to said it very nicely. He said that now this corporation, the new unified corporation that will come in, could be set anywhere in the country. It wouldn't matter that the Delhi government has nothing to do with it. So it being in Delhi now is just incidental to its location. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the Delhi government now. In all the places where the earlier act spoke about the local government, the word has been replaced by the central government. So that is essentially what this bill does.
Okay, so you mentioned that a lot of things were anyway under the centre's control. But with this bill coming in, what kind of loss is it for the Aam Aadmi Party?
So, in terms of governance, not really as much. The biggest loss per se, and it's all about the timing, would be elections, would be the polls that were supposed to happen in April. So the State Election Commissioner had earlier this month on 9th of March called a press conference, and in the press invitation they said that elections will be held in April. The press conference was to declare the dates for the elections. But a few hours before that, they had to, issue a statement and say that it's not going to happen anymore because the centre is coming out with this unification bill. Since then, the biggest grouse of the Aam Aadmi Party has been that this is just a ploy to delay polls. That it doesn't really change anything on the ground, that reunification could have happened after the polls, whenever they wanted. It could have happened. But just because the Aam Aadmi Party was on a high after winning Punjab and there was this momentum, they believed, it's because of that this bill has been brought forth at this point. So their main grouse is this actually. It's not really what they lose because, as I said, they already had very little say in the MCDs in any case.
तो लोग कह रहे हैं कि एमसीडी को इकट्ठा करना, एक करना तो बहाना है, मकसद चुनाव टालने का था. क्योंकि बीजेपी को लग रहा था कि दिल्ली में अगर चुनाव होंगे तो आम आदमी पार्टी की जबरदस्त लहर है, बीजेपी उस लहर में बह जाएगी और बीजेपी हार जाएगी. इसलिए चुनाव टालने के मंशा से ये किया गया. ये देश के लिए अच्छा नहीं है. आज ये कहा जा रहा है कि हम तीनों एमसीडी एक करना चाहते हैं, इसीलिए चुनाव टाल दीजिए. कल को मान लो लोकसभा का चुनाव है, उसके पहले अगर कहा जाएगा कि ये पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम अच्छा नहीं है, हम प्रेसिडेंशियल सिस्टम लाना चाहते हैं, संविधान में बदलाव करना चाहते हैं, इसलिए चुनाव टाल दीजिए, तो क्या चुनाव टाले जाएंगे?
Okay, and apart from the Aam Aadmi Party, there are others in the opposition that have also opposed the bill. What are some of the things that they have been saying?
So all parties are actually for unification of MCDs. So the trifurcation of MCDs was done in 2011-12 under the then Sheila Dikshit's Congress government. And at that time, even in the center, the Congress was in power. But after that, the way things played out and the experience has been that the way the trifurcation was done, it left the North and the East civic bodies starved of funds because South Delhi was where they were getting most of their property taxes, advertisement revenue from. As I said, the objection is not really against unifying. In fact, a lot of experts over the years have batted for unification as one of the few solutions to this problem of funding in MCDs.
So in that sense, the timing is what is really suspect. But the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP, which is at the center, have always had a tussle going on between them. How do we see this bill in the context of that ongoing tussle?
So, if you read it alongside the NCT Delhi Government Amendment Act, which was passed earlier by the centre, that also to take away powers from the Delhi government and basically declared that the LG was the government in the National Capital Territory. And while, even before that amendment bill was passed and it became an act, the LG was actually, because Delhi is a union territory, it has a special character, but it's still a union territory. The LG was actually the head of the government, but a lot of powers resided with the elected government. With that bill, it basically said that everything has to go through the LG. So the LG's assent is important on all matters, which earlier the Supreme Court in its order had said that was only so in the case of land, law and order, policing and services. So if you see it in that perspective, if you see it, taking all of these different happenings together, you see that Delhi government, the elected government, is losing some bit of power on administrative and governance matters. And the centre wants that it should be the one that takes the final call on the capital.
And besides what we have discussed, is there anything else that stands out in this bill that raises concerns?
So there are two other very important aspects of this bill. One is delimitation, and this is why the elections are going to be delayed. So right now there are 272 wards under all three MCDs combined. The bill says that the number of seats, which is councillors selected per ward, cannot be more than 250, which means that obviously a fresh delimitation exercise will have to be undertaken. And if experts are to be believed, that cannot take less than 6 months. And the Aam Aadmi Party actually believes that it will be more like a year or so. And the second most important thing is that this bill gives the centre the power to appoint a special officer till the time that the first meeting of the unified house takes place, which can take place only after the elections have happened. So it basically gives the centre the power to have a special officer in place to govern the MCDs till elections are held. And whether held 3 months later, 6 months later, or a year later. Now, according to some people that we've spoken to in the BJP and across parties, it's possible that the centre wants to put in a special officer to show how well-governed MCDs can be under its rule, under its direct rule. So, obviously, this part is all speculation, but the bill does talk about giving the centre the power to appoint a special officer.
And in the end, we talk about startups like Urban Company and Zomato. Turns out that popular startups like these, apart from offering services like they usually do, are now also planning to sell their own specific products directly to customers. And they're planning to do this based on the data that they have gathered over the years. Indian Express's Soumyarendra Barik, who has been reporting on such startups, now joins us to talk about their plans. So Soumyarendra, what kind of products are these startups like Urban Company planning to sell now?
So Shashank, Urban Company is right now in the process of launching its own range of water purifiers. under the urban company, they have a branding called True Water. So under their own brand name, they're launching water purifiers. An announcement is, according to sources, expected soon. So the thing is that the company initially, because of its service-based model, used to manufacture its own reverse osmosis, that is RO filters, so the filters that go inside these purifiers. And the service professionals who work on urban companies' platform, they used to then buy it from the company and later put it into customers' water purifiers. So now what happened is that the company had a sort of insight into, service schedules and like the demand that people had for water purifiers and like water filters in general. And I think for them, it was a natural decision from there on, which lends to the idea that they had this data and this insight that was generated because of years long of offering services, that then they felt that launching a water purifier, like an entire water purifier, just makes more sense because I'm sure they saw some sort of customer engagement or some sort of customer need there. The company is also right now hiring more people to develop more products. So it's fast tracking it, it's doubling down, it's focusing very much into products. And what sources told me is that they're starting with a water purifier, but a bunch of other products are also currently in the pipeline. But that will only happen, depending on how the customer response to the water purifier is. So we'll have to wait and watch for that.
Okay, so Urban Company has done this. It is planning to sell products directly to customers. Are there other companies that are also planning to do this?
So Meesho, which recently a few months ago had raised a huge round and, had a valuation of around $5 billion. Facebook is one of their backers, etc. So Meesho typically, when it started off, it was as a social commerce reseller-led model. And typically the products available on Meesho's platform used to be unbranded products. But of late, what has happened is that Meesho is really focusing into entering direct-to-consumer channels, which pits it directly against companies, say like an Amazon or Flipkart, which caters directly to customers without a reseller-led model. But I think the company there understood that, to sell products to customers directly, the products themselves need to have some sort of legitimacy. So maybe an unbranded product may not be as appealing to a customer of a direct-to-consumer sort of a platform. So what sources have told us is that they're right now, talking to many smaller and affordable brands to onboard them onto their platform and then start selling branded products on its platform. And one interesting nugget of information that we found during the reporting was that ever since the company has shifted its focus from a reseller-led model to this direct-to-consumer sort of a channel model, more than 60% of Meesho's transacting users right now are coming from its direct selling business, which is a huge number for them. And what sources told us was that the company was looking to leverage that by partnering with these smaller brands and later then launching branded products. And I think they're going to start with men's focused products first. And I'm sure even that is happening because the company knows that the demography, the kind of people that end up buying products that are on offer or tend to sell the most on their platform. So I think all of this lends from data. And I think when any company practically makes decisions like this, I'm sure data plays a huge role in that.
Okay, so one aspect is these companies using data that they have gathered to make specific products. Are there other ways we are seeing these companies make changes based on the data that they have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as far as the urban company example, for instance, goes, it's a clear shift from a service sort of a model to venturing, expanding into the product sort of a side. But then right now, this 10-minute delivery, fast deliveries, quick commerce is all the rage in the country right now. And Zomato actually recently took a plunge into the 10-minute food delivery segment. And the company actually, when it was announcing, it said that the insights that it had generated over the years by delivering food would allow it to actually set up a network of food stores in close proximity to high demand customer neighborhoods. These stores themselves will house, the highest selling items in a given locality. Again, everything that you learn from data. And the company is actually predicting that cooking times for these items available in these, quick stores would be between 2 to 4 minutes because the demand for those products is very, very predictable. Now, all of this, I'm sure, billions of orders have been ordered, placed and delivered on Zomato. And I'm sure that Zomato knows that, a particular locality, say in Delhi, orders this kind of food the most. All these companies, Swiggy and Zomato, at the end of every year, they have this interesting nugget of information that, in India, biryani was the most ordered food, for instance, or McD's McPuff is perhaps the most popular McDonald's menu item and stuff like that.
Or in Delhi, butter chicken, for example, might be popular.
Exactly. So, courtesy of, delivering billions and billions of orders. And, I'm sure in their own dashboards, they can go extremely specific. So, right now in Lajpat Nagar, I'm sure Zomato knows what is the highest selling product in Lajpat Nagar 1A block also. So I'm sure it's very granular data, and which is allowing the company to build these stores and already keep items that it already knows sell the most there, because those are the products that would tend to be ordered the most by users. And we've spoken about Zomato. So Blinkit, with which Zomato currently is in talks of a merger/acquisition, and it's also loaned millions of dollars to the company. So Blinkit recently pivoted to delivering groceries in under 10 minutes. And for that, it has opened like a web of dark stores where it's keeping all of its groceries and stuff like that. And the products that are kept in these dark stores themselves are based on consumer data that, Blinkit had gathered as an e-grocer in its earlier avatar of Grofers, when it was known as Grofers. So they're using data to not just venture into a new sort of business, but also be ready and predict a demand because they've already seen what sort of products are being ordered there. So I think that's also another angle about how these companies are using data to sort of not just expand into businesses, but already know how those businesses are potentially going to run over the coming months and years.
I mean, in that sense, it is natural for companies to take advantage of the data that they have gathered from consumers to improve their business. But are there also concerns that come to mind based on what they're doing?
So, Shashank, I'll take the first part of the question also, because also that's interesting about the transitions and the expansions that we're seeing. So, of course, I've been running a business. I've delivered billions of dollars worth of services on my platform. So for me, of course, I've generated data. And of course, as a company in the business of making money, for me, it is very natural to, use this data because it allows me to expand into newer businesses. And, which does two things. It opens up additional revenue streams. And at the same time, it also acts as an instrument to lure investors that, okay, this is my new pitch now. Okay, I'm doing 10-minute deliveries now. Okay, I'm selling branded products now. Okay, I'm also selling water purifiers now. So, these things can be potentially added to pitch decks and circulated to investors. And it generates interest also. And specifically as far as startups in India go, for service-based startups like Urban Company, Meesho, etc., expanding to products is a very natural fit. Because what product-led startups have shown us, you can take examples of Boat, which was recently publicly listed, or companies like WakeFit, or, this mom and child beauty care company called Mama Earth, etc. So what we've seen is that product companies typically have higher margins because products themselves have higher margins, which has allowed these startups to, turn profitable, which for service-based startups is a very difficult thing to achieve. So I think for them, it's very obvious that they would want to shift to products because of the higher margins there. And yeah, as far as the concerns go, I mean, of course, you can use all the data you have at your disposal or whatever. And, you can build new segments, you can expand into new businesses. But, it's not like a guaranteed sort of a thing that if you just use data-led insights or whatever, your product or service will end up being successful. And I think the biggest example for that is Zomato again itself. Zomato has been experimenting a lot. Of course, some with a lot of success, like its food delivery segment, for instance, and some with very, very limited success. Of course, it's grocery thing that it started at the beginning of the lockdowns in 2020, etc. But that shut down pretty quickly. And also in March last year, Zomato had started selling nutraceuticals, health supplements and stuff like that under its own brand name. But it had to shut it down in within or less than 6 months because there was a muted response. So that also lends to the fact that, okay, even if you see that there was perhaps a use case, maybe a customer didn't want to go to someone like a Zomato to be buying a nutraceutical product, for instance. And I'm sure because the customer felt that there were better alternatives for that. So I think it's companies should, of course, err on the side of caution that, just because you have some data or you've generated a bunch of data, it's always going to lead to successful business plans. I think that is definitely one area where they should err on the side of caution.
You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.